hero or a murderer? You're going to get to meet him and find out today on the Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone. I've got a really special guest today. Somebody I feel really honored to get a chance to interview. This is a young man who really got the short end of the stick from the U.S. government and is more precisely the Obama administration, I would say. And so his name is Clint Lorance, and he's the author of a new book that's called Stolen Honor. And you can find it at stolenhonorbook.com. I'm going to bring in Clint now and just have him tell us his story. Thanks for being with us, Lieutenant Lorance, right?
Clint, yeah. I gave up that whole Army thing, so
yeah, I guess so.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Sure thing. Tell me a little bit. Just tell our viewers about your story, start to finish, as if you're explaining it to a sixth grader, because that's about the level that I'm at.
You too?
Yeah.
Okay, so we were in Afghanistan, and it was in 2012. We were in a remote sector of the southern part of Afghanistan, and I was an infantry platoon leader in the 82nd Airborne Division, and we were on a foot patrol, and the Afghan Army soldiers were up front of the patrol, and so they were supposed to be in charge of the patrol the way that the forces were aligned at that time. We were trying to hand the country back over to them, and so July 1st, 2012 was the beginning of something called Afghan in the Lead. And so this patrol happened on July 2nd, 2012. So, roughly one day after the Afghans were supposedly supposed to be in the lead. So the Afghan Army soldiers were up front, and my men were in the back, and I was somewhere in the middle. And as we were crossing a road, and we're all on foot, the Afghan Army soldiers began to fire at a motorcycle that's approaching our patrol. Now, I can't see what's going on because I was navigating an obstacle. I was climbing over a wall at this time. And so I responded to what I was hearing on the ground and what I was hearing from the helicopters on the radio and what I was hearing from my men on the radio. And then what I could obviously hear myself in real life. And I did a very quick threat assessment in terms of what could happen if I didn't act, or what could happen if I did act. So at the time, the Taliban was very effectively using motorcycles against us, especially when we were on foot and they were on motorcycles. They would come up and they would detonate their motorcycle. And the way that they did it is they would put C4, because C4 is moldable like Play-Doh. Mm-hmm. So they would put C4 underneath the gas tank or in the engine components of the motorcycle, or even underneath the seat, and they would have the ignition switch on the handlebar, so it looks like it's supposed to be there. Well, then they would come up right next to U.S. troops and NATO troops and get just close enough to where they would push that button on the handlebars and they would explode themselves and kill several NATO troops as well. So we all knew that as infantry officers. It's our job to know the enemy's tactics and to study the enemy's tactics nonstop, and to try and predict what the enemy is going to do next. So taking all of that into account, having read all the intelligence, and doing a threat assessment as to what could happen, and then taking into account the Afghan Army started firing first. They know their country better than we do. They know their culture better than we do. And so I got on the radio and told everybody to cease fire because I was concerned about civilian collateral damage that I was concerned about. Because you never know when the Afghan Army starts firing at stuff. They don't have all the best equipment like we do.
They don't have the same trigger discipline by any stretch.
They really don't. And the way that the forces were arrayed in 2012, I don't know how it is now, but back then, they would just pick up anything that resembled a weapon and take it into battle. And so a lot of them had RPGs as their primary weapon, grenade launchers as their primary weapon, whereas American forces, we all have an M4 or an M16 as our primary weapon. So I was worried about collateral damage if they started firing at stuff, because they're not only firing small arms, they're also firing shoulder-launched missiles. So I told everybody to cease fire, and I ordered my gun truck, which was positioned on overwatch, to fire at the threat. So bowing to political pressure, my chain of command decided to charge some of myself and some of my men with murder. And later on, my men were ordered to testify against me. 9 of them were ordered to testify against me. So 9 out of a 40-man platoon. And there's a lot to be said about that, and I write about it in the book. But in terms of loyalty and all these things, but the bottom line is, in the military, when you are ordered to do something and it's lawful, you have to do it. And those men were ordered to testify. So they didn't have much of a choice. But so ultimately what happened was I was sent to military prison at Fort Leavenworth for 20 years on August 1st, 2013.
And ended up serving 6 years of that 20 years. And then what happened?
Yeah, I served 6 years. So during that 6 years, there was an organization called United American Patriots, and they came on board and took my case. And once they came on board, they actually started raising money to actually fund a good lawyer, and they actually funded a team of really great lawyers. And these lawyers were able to actually go to Afghanistan and send law enforcement investigators to Afghanistan, and they found just incredible evidence that the Army the government prosecutors had in their possession at the time of my trial, that they decided not to tell anybody about. And it was that there was DNA evidence to prove that the men that we killed that day were not only bad guys, part of the Taliban, but they were part of the same Taliban cell that had the blood of American soldiers and Marines on their hands, specifically 6 American soldiers and Marines that had been killed by this Taliban cell. So these were really bad guys, but the Army prosecutors left all of that out of my court-martial. And another thing they left out was video footage from an overhead blimp system that had a camera on it, that basically had a video footage of the entire event. It was manned by a civilian contractor over there in 2012. This contractor reached out to the Army, the government prosecutors, and my chain of command, and my court-appointed attorney, which is never a good deal. It's never a good deal to have a court-appointed attorney because they're always very busy. So they reached out to these people, and everybody just ignored it. Nobody even responded to his emails. So here's a guy who had video footage of what happened, and nobody even paid attention to him. And I think that's hugely telling about the system itself. None of that stuff was allowed into my trial. And so what they did present at my trial were these seemingly innocent conversations that I had, telling jokes to my fellow officers, and these just random things. Like one of them was that, and I write about this in the book as well. One of them was that after a meeting one day when I was a staff officer, one of my fellow soldiers, a female sergeant first class, she had gotten chewed out by our commander during the meeting. And I felt bad for her because it was a terrible day for everybody. And I thought that the commander in that instance was, he was too harsh on her because he was blaming her for stuff that wasn't her fault. And so she was having a terrible day. And so I'm a great looking guy, at least I think. And so back then I was better looking, and I was in great shape. And so I was like, you know what, here's my opportunity to make this person, this human being, feel good for at least a couple of seconds. And so I told her, I was like, she had put on some new perfume or whatever, and which is not normal in a combat zone. So I comment, I told her, I said, Sergeant, you smell good right now. And she never complained about that. She blushed and got red and just kind of giggled and went on. And I felt good that I was able to make her feel better about her life, at least for a second. But nobody ever complained about that. She never complained about it. Nobody ever said it was inappropriate. And that was the only time that anybody ever would hear me say anything like that. But that over a year later, there was a captain who was walking with us to that day, because we were walking back from the meeting. There was an Army captain who was walking with us. He heard that and didn't say anything at the time. But a year later, he came up and offered up to the Army, the government prosecutors, that I had said this, and he thought it was inappropriate. And so that must mean that I'm a bad guy. And so
it's unbelievable.
All these silly things that they brought up at the court martial that I was sitting there thinking, you're trying me for murder right now. Like you're charging me with hardcore stuff, but you're going to bring up this as evidence against me. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Yeah. I mean, this just makes my blood boil, really. It makes me wonder if the judges, it was a panel of military judges, right? Is that correct? Or just one judge?
It was just one judge. And one of the things that I write about in the book as well is the first day of the court martial. It was a 3-day trial, and it was in the beginning of the week. And the first day of the trial, the judge got on the stand, she sat down on her bench, and she was an Army colonel, and she asked the prosecutor and the defense, she said something along the lines of, how long is this going to take? Because I have a soccer game on Friday night that I have to get to. And I was just absolutely like, did she just say that? I could potentially go to prison for the rest of my life, and she's worried about getting to her soccer game.
Well, and the question would be, has she ever been in Afghanistan walking on a patrol in an area that's heavily known for Taliban suicide bombers? Because, this armchair quarterbacking that you see from top brass in the military very often, and more so under the Obama administration, is so infuriating. I remember when I first started going to Afghanistan in 2006 or 7, something like that, and it was big boy country. And if you needed to get somewhere, you went to the airfield, and you said, "Hey, I need to go to Herat," and they'd say, "Oh, that chopper's going," and then you'd run out and get on the helicopter and go. Now it's like, when I was there last year, it's like Dulles Airport. I mean, you got to have 6 different kinds of ID to get through there. And I mean, just to get into the chow hall or something, there's full bird colonels out there standing there giving out tickets to people that aren't wearing their road guard belts on base, and stuff. And you think, wow, we must have won this war already. And I started calling it the greater flagpole theory, because it's almost like the military needed this war so that top brass could get their quote unquote combat commands while never actually seeing any combat. They don't, they're fobbits. They don't leave the base. When I've been out on combat outposts with Marines and soldiers who are literally getting hit every day and having to make life or death decisions in a heartbeat, and then these guys have the gall to armchair quarterback what you did and not stand behind you. It just makes my blood boil. It makes me feel like saying, well, if you're not willing to stand behind him, then feel free to stand in front of him. Here's my question. We're kind of running out of time, but here's my question, kind of to wrap this up. How are you getting over this without being bitter?
Well, to me, being bitter is not an option. It's not productive, and it doesn't make sense. So I am in my first semester of law school. I actually just got out of a class on lawsuits, which is like the most boring class ever. And I wrote this book, Stolen Honor, and I am working very closely trying to recruit as many members of the U.S. House of Representatives as possible to join the Congressional Justice for Warriors Caucus that Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas has created. and the Congressional Justice for Warriors Caucus. I was actually just texting with the executive director before I got on with you. Is what they're trying to do is make sure what happened to me never happens to anybody else. And I think it's very important that we think about what's going on in American cities right now in terms of mayors and city managers willing to sacrifice police officers for political will of the day. So what they're doing is they're seeing the mobs burn down their cities and tear down their statues, and they're saying, hey, mob, don't worry. I'm going to put my police officers in jail so to make you happy. That's what happened under Obama in the military justice system. And so I think we got to be very, very careful with turning the courts, the criminal justice system, whether it be in the civilian side or the military side. We got to be careful not to turn the courts into a political tool, because when that happens, stuff that happens to me is going to begin to happen to everybody else in our
That's
society.
right.
We want that.
There can be no justice when the court is a political entity.
Right.
And that's exactly what the Obama administration made it. It very heavily politicized the U.S. military and kind of turned it into a gigantic social experiment that has not redounded positively to its sense of mission readiness or anything like that. And it is a cautionary tale, let's put it that way. Well, thank you, Clint. I wish we had more time to talk, but we're out of time. And I'm planning to get your book, and we'll go read it. I really hate it when I get interviewed by people about my books and they haven't themselves read my books. And so I'm sorry about that. Please accept my apologies. But I will go get it, and I will read it, and I hope a lot of our viewers will as well. Like I say, it's a cautionary tale, folks. When America needs heroes, and when we take people who are doing heroic things, and instead we crucify them for those heroic things, it does not benefit our country in any way, shape, or form. So thank you very much, Clint. I really appreciate it.
God bless you. We'll see you.
All right, cool.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.